I refused to keep supporting my freeloading brother. My mom begged me to back down, but I stood my ground, and then, living at home with my mom at 28 wasn't part of the plan. But life doesn't always work out the way you expect. My dad passed away 4 years ago, and with my mom, Caroline, relying on a fixed pension, I moved back to help her out. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. We split the bills, shared the grocery expenses, and generally kept the peace in our modest home in Evansville, Indiana. It was predictable, manageable, even comforting in its simplicity. But everything changed the day my older brother Ryan came back. Ryan was 33 and had always been the golden child growing up, at least in Mom's eyes. He was the one with big dreams, the one who could do no wrong. Years ago, he left for Chicago, chasing a bright future in marketing, but it didn't pan out. He lost his job in a round of layoffs, broke up with his girlfriend of 6 years, and burned through his savings. One day, he showed up on our doorstep with nothing but a suitcase, some flimsy excuses, and a promise to get back on his feet. When I opened the door to see Ryan standing there, I couldn't say I was surprised. The writing had been on the wall for years. He'd always been reckless with money and quick to blame others when things went south. But knowing what to expect didn't make it easier to deal with. Mom, of course, was thrilled to see him. She hugged him tightly, tears in her eyes, and ushered him inside like a war hero returning home. "Just until I figure things out, Ev," Ryan said as he dumped his suitcase on the living room floor. "I'm already lining up interviews. This'll be temporary." I wanted to believe him, for Mom's sake more than anything. But deep down, I knew better. The first few days were fine, though Ryan's presence immediately disrupted the balance we'd maintained. He sprawled across the couch, his gaming setup quickly dominating the living room, and commandeered the TV for hours. I bit my tongue, telling myself he needed time to settle in. By the end of the first week, I was already regretting my silence. Ryan wasn't just staying with us, he was taking over. He slept until noon most days, emerged groggy to pour himself a bowl of cereal, and spent the rest of the day gaming or scrolling through social media. When I asked him about job hunting, he waved me off. "I've got leads," he said, "just waiting for the right opportunity." Leads? Sure. I wasn't buying it. Mom, ever the optimist, defended him. "He's had a tough year, Evan. Give him some time." I wanted to tell her time wasn't what Ryan needed. He needed a wake-up call, and fast. But I didn't want to argue with her, especially not after everything she'd been through. So, I kept my frustrations to myself for a while. Things came to a head when I noticed notifications popping up on Ryan's phone. They were charges for in-game purchases, skins, loot boxes, and other nonsense, while he claimed he couldn't afford to chip in for groceries. The first time he asked me to cover his share of the utilities, he promised it was a one-time thing. "I'll pay you back as soon as I get my first paycheck," he said. Except, there was no paycheck. I confronted him about it one evening after dinner. "Ryan, when are you planning to start contributing? Mom and I can't keep covering for you." He shrugged, barely looking up from his game. "Relax, Ev. I told you, I'm working on it, working on it." That was Ryan's go-to line. It was as empty as his promises to pay me back. Mom, sitting at the dining table with a cup of tea, interjected. "Evan, he's trying. You need to be more patient." Patient? I was running out of patience. But arguing with Ryan was like shouting into the void, and arguing with Mom only made me feel guilty. So, I let it go. Again. The breaking point came when I came home from work one evening and saw it. A brand new gaming chair, sleek, expensive, and completely unnecessary. Ryan was lounging in it like a king on a throne, headset on, shouting at his teammates in whatever game he was playing. I stood in the doorway, staring at the chair in disbelief. "Ryan," I said, my voice low but steady, "where did you get that?" He glanced over his shoulder, grinning. "Oh, this? Got it online. Stress purchase. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I didn't know how someone could justify buying a $600 chair while claiming they couldn't afford to split the water bill. My jaw tightened, but before I could say anything, he turned back to his game, oblivious to my growing anger. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every excuse Ryan had made since he'd moved in. The gaming chair wasn't just a chair. It was a symbol of his entitlement, his complete disregard for the strain he was putting on Mom and me. Something had to change. But how do you confront someone who refuses to see the problem? How do you draw a line when the person on the other side doesn't care if they cross it? I didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was clear. Ryan wasn't going to change on his own. If I wanted peace back in our home, I'd have to fight for it. After the gaming chair incident, it was impossible to keep pretending things were fine. Ryan wasn't just a temporary guest. He'd become a permanent headache. The dynamic in the house shifted, and not in a good way. Every day brought a new reminder of how little Ryan cared about the impact he was having on our lives. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, thinking maybe he was genuinely struggling. But it was hard to stay sympathetic when I'd come home from work to find him exactly where I'd left him, sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, surrounded by empty soda cans and snack wrappers. It wasn't just the laziness that got to me. It was the sense of entitlement. The groceries were a constant issue. I'd stock up on food, making sure to pick up a few things I liked. Some specialty coffee, a pack of granola bars, maybe a frozen pizza for a treat. And within days, it would all be gone. Ryan didn't even bother hiding it. When I confronted him, he acted like I was the one being unreasonable. "It's just food, Evan," he said, like that excused it. "Don't be so uptight." "It's not about the food," I shot back. "It's about respect. You don't contribute to groceries, but you're the first one to help yourself to everything in the fridge." He just shrugged and went back to his game, completely unfazed. Mom tried to mediate, but her efforts only made things worse. "Evan, he's your brother," she said. "Family helps family." "That's all I've been doing, Mom," I said. "But he's taking advantage of us." Mom sighed, clearly torn. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she looked at Ryan like he was still the boy she'd raised, not the man-child who had turned our house into his personal playground. And then there were the bills. Ryan's "I'll pay you back" promises had stacked up so high, they might as well have been a second mortgage. He didn't just miss payments. He ignored them entirely. When the water bill came with a shutoff notice, I had no choice but to cover it. That night, I confronted him again. "You need to start pulling your weight," I said firmly. "This isn't fair to me or Mom." Ryan leaned back in his precious gaming chair, twirling a forkful of instant noodles like we were discussing the weather. "Relax, Ev. I'll pay you back when I get a job. Do you even have a plan?" I asked. "Because it sure doesn't look like you're trying." Ryan rolled his eyes. "I'm figuring it out. Not everyone lands a cushy job right out of college, you know?" The audacity of that comment left me speechless. My job wasn't cushy by any stretch. I worked long hours, often dealing with stressful deadlines, just to make ends meet. Ryan had no idea what it meant to work hard because he'd never had to. Mom had always cushioned his falls, and now I was expected to do the same. The tension in the house became unbearable. Ryan's freeloading wasn't just a financial strain. It was emotional too. He'd pit Mom and me against each other, playing the victim whenever I called him out. Mom, bless her heart, always tried to see the best in him, even when there wasn't much to see. "He's going through a tough time," she'd say. "He just needs a little patience." "How much patience is enough?" I asked. "He's not even looking for a job. He spends all day gaming or napping. This isn't a tough time. It's laziness." Mom didn't have an answer for that, but she still wouldn't push Ryan to step up. And Ryan, of course, took full advantage of her soft spot. He knew she wouldn't kick him out, no matter how much trouble he caused. One day, a family friend named Mark came over for coffee. As they chatted in the kitchen, I overheard Mark mention seeing Ryan at a bar downtown in the middle of the day. My ears perked up. That was the same day Ryan had told us he had a job interview. "Are you sure it was Ryan?" I asked, stepping into the kitchen. "Positive," Mark said. "He was with a couple of guys, having a good time. Looked like he didn't have a care in the world." My blood boiled. I thanked Mark for the information and went straight to Ryan. "Did you even go to that interview?" I asked, my voice low and steady. Ryan barely looked up from his phone. "What are you talking about?" "Mark saw you at a bar that day." "You lied to us." Ryan smirked, like he'd been caught in a harmless prank. "Relax. The interview was a waste of time anyway." "That's not the point, Ryan," I snapped. You're lying to us, and meanwhile, I'm covering your bills and picking up your slack. Ryan didn't even bother defending himself. He just brushed me off like my frustration was an overreaction. That night, I decided I couldn't keep enabling him. Something had to change. The final straw came when I found him snooping through my mail. I walked into the living room to find him flipping through an envelope from my bank. When I demanded to know what he was doing, he acted like it was no big deal. Just curious, he said nonchalantly. Stay out of my stuff, I said through gritted teeth. If you touch my mail again, we're going to have a serious problem. Ryan laughed, clearly not taking me seriously. That laugh stayed with me long after I went to bed that night, fueling the resolve building in my chest. Ryan had crossed too many lines, and I was done letting it slide. By this point, I was counting down the days until I could confront him with a clear ultimatum. I didn't know how he would react, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to give. It had been weeks of the same cycle with Ryan. Excuses, broken promises, and a complete lack of responsibility. Each day, the tension in the house grew thicker, and I knew I couldn't keep waiting for him to magically change. So, one evening during dinner, I decided to finally confront him. Mom had made her famous spaghetti, a meal she always whipped up to ease tension. Unfortunately, it wasn't going to work this time. As we sat at the table, I took a deep breath and jumped in. Ryan, I started, setting my fork down. We need to talk about the bills. Ryan didn't even look up, too busy twirling his spaghetti like a carefree teenager. What about them? You haven't paid your share in months. You've been living here rent-free, eating our food, and treating this place like a hotel. It's not fair to me or Mom. Ryan leaned back in his chair and gave me that smirk I'd come to hate. Wow, Ev, way to make dinner awkward. Couldn't this wait? No, it can't, I snapped. I'm tired of carrying you. It's time for you to step up and start contributing. Ryan rolled his eyes. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Just because you have a steady job and no kids doesn't mean you can act high and mighty. This isn't about me being better than you. I shot back. This is about fairness. Mom and I are struggling to keep up with the bills while you sit here doing nothing. Mom tried to intervene, her voice soft but shaky. Evan, let's not turn this into a fight. Ryan's had a tough year. Mom, I know you want to help him, I said, trying to keep my tone calm, but enabling him isn't helping. He's not even trying. He spends all day gaming or watching TV. Ryan slammed his fork down, suddenly animated. You have no idea what I'm going through. I lost my job, my girlfriend, my apartment, everything, and now you're rubbing my nose in it? Some brother you are. It's not about what you've been through, I said, my voice rising. It's about what you're doing now. And what you're doing is nothing. The conversation spiraled from there, turning into a full-blown shouting match. Ryan accused me of being selfish and unsupportive, claiming I didn't understand what it was like to struggle. Mom, caught in the middle, looked torn and helpless. Eventually, Ryan pushed his chair back and stormed out of the room, yelling over his shoulder, "You're a real piece of work, Evan. Don't think I'm going to forget this." For the next few days, Ryan barely spoke to me. When he did, it was to make passive-aggressive comments about how some people think they're better than everyone else. Mom begged me to apologize to keep the peace, but I refused. I wasn't the one in the wrong here. The situation hit a new low when I received the water bill. Ryan's share was, once again, unpaid, and this time the company was threatening to cut us off if the full amount wasn't covered. Furious, I paid it myself to avoid the shutoff, but confronted Ryan as soon as he walked through the door. Ryan, you promised you'd pay your part of the water bill, I said, holding the bill up as evidence. He shrugged, completely unfazed. I'll pay you back when I can. That's what you've been saying for months. I shouted. Do you even hear yourself? Ryan brushed past me, muttering under his breath, Relax, man. It's just water. It wasn't just water. It was everything. It was the groceries he devoured without replacing. It was the streaming services he used to rent movies and games without asking. It was the way he treated my room like his personal storage space whenever I wasn't home. The final straw came when I caught him going through my mail again. This time, he didn't even bother pretending he wasn't snooping. He was sitting on the couch, flipping through an envelope from my bank. When I walked in, "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. Ryan glanced up, completely unbothered. "Chill out. I was just curious." "Curious about what?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. "This is private. Stay out of my stuff." Ryan smirked and tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. "You're so uptight, Ev. It's no wonder you're always stressed." I was done. That night, I sat Mom down and told her I couldn't keep living like this. "I'm giving Ryan an ultimatum," I said. "He has 2 weeks to start paying his share of the bills, or he's out." Mom looked horrified. "Evan, you can't just kick him out. He's your brother, and he's draining us, Mom." I've tried to be patient, but he's not even making an effort. This has to stop. Mom didn't argue with me, but she didn't agree either. I could tell she was hoping it wouldn't come to that, but I knew it would. Ryan had made it clear he wasn't going to change unless he was forced to. The next morning, I told Ryan about the ultimatum. He laughed, completely dismissing it. "You're bluffing," he said. "You wouldn't actually kick me out." "Try me," I replied, my voice cold and steady. "You've got 2 weeks, Ryan. Figure it out." For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual smug confidence. "We'll see about that," he said, turning back to his game. As the days passed, Ryan made no effort to change. He didn't pay the bills, didn't contribute to groceries, and certainly didn't look for a job. It was as if he thought I wouldn't follow through. But I was ready. I'd reached my breaking point, and I wasn't going to back down. The deadline was approaching fast, and I knew things were about to get messy. But I didn't care. I'd been carrying Ryan long enough. It was time for him to stand on his own, or face the consequences. The 2-week deadline came and went, and Ryan hadn't changed a thing. He hadn't paid his share of the bills, contributed to groceries, or even made an effort to look for a job. If anything, he seemed more defiant, as though testing how far I'd let him push me. But this time, I wasn't bluffing. On the morning of the final day, I found him lounging in the living room, his feet propped up on the coffee table, controller in hand. He didn't even acknowledge me when I walked in. "Ryan," I said, standing in front of the TV to get his attention, "your time's up. You need to pack your things and leave." He paused his game, leaning back in his obnoxiously expensive gaming chair. "You're really kicking me out? After everything I've been through?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I gave you 2 weeks to step up, and you did nothing. I'm done carrying you." Ryan's face twisted with indignation. "Unbelievable. You're abandoning your own brother when I need you the most. What would Dad think of you right now?" That hit a nerve, but I didn't let it show. "Don't bring Dad into this. This is about your choices, not his memory. You've taken advantage of Mom and me for months, and it stops now." Ryan jumped to his feet, his voice rising. "You don't care about family. All you care about is money. You're a selfish, arrogant jerk." "Enough," I snapped. "Pack your things and leave. This is your decision, Ryan. You chose not to change." Mom walked in just as Ryan's shouting escalated. She looked from me to Ryan, her face a mixture of worry and exhaustion. "What's going on?" "I'm kicking him out," I said. "It's been 2 weeks, and he hasn't done a thing." "Mom," Ryan said, turning to her with wide, pleading eyes, "you're really going to let him do this to me? Your own son?" Mom hesitated, torn as always. But this time, she didn't jump to his defense. "Ryan," she said softly, "maybe it's time for you to figure things out on your own." Ryan looked stunned, as though he couldn't believe she wasn't taking his side. "Unreal," he muttered, shaking his head. "You're both unbelievable." It took him 3 more days to actually leave, and he made sure to cause as much chaos as possible on his way out. He left piles of trash and random junk scattered across the house. His room was a disaster zone, with old clothes, empty soda cans, and food wrappers shoved into corners. He didn't bother cleaning anything up. He just grabbed his gaming chair, a couple of bags, and stormed out without a word. The day after he left, I walked into his room to start cleaning. The smell hit me like a punch to the face. Stale food, spilled soda, and something else I didn't even want to identify. Plates with crusted food were shoved under the bed, and one of the trash bags had leaked onto the carpet, leaving a dark, sticky stain. I spent hours scrubbing, vacuuming, and airing out the room. By the time I was done, I was exhausted. But at least the house felt a little more livable. As I sorted through the wreckage, I noticed a few things were missing. My noise-canceling headphones, a couple of gift cards I tucked away in my desk, and even an old watch Dad had given me were gone. At first, I thought I'd misplaced them, but the more I looked, the clearer it became. Ryan had taken them. I confronted Mom about it, hoping she might have seen him with the items. She looked heartbroken when I brought up the watch. He mentioned needing headphones, she admitted hesitantly, but I thought he was just borrowing them. Borrowing them? I repeated. He didn't even ask. Mom didn't have an answer, and I didn't press her. It wasn't her fault Ryan had turned out this way, but it hurt to see her so disillusioned. A week later, I got a call from our landlord. Apparently, there had been noise complaints while Ryan was still living with us. Neighbors had reported loud music and yelling late at night, which I hadn't even noticed thanks to my long work hours. The landlord wasn't happy and warned us that any more complaints could lead to penalties. It was embarrassing to explain that Ryan had already moved out and that I'd make sure it didn't happen again. As if that wasn't enough, I started getting calls from debt collectors. Ryan had left behind some unpaid bills, and because we'd shared an address, they tracked me down. The collectors were relentless, calling at all hours and refusing to take no for an answer until I threatened to report them. Then came the online drama. Ryan took to social media, painting himself as the victim. According to his posts, I'd kicked him out with no warning, leaving him homeless and destitute. He made me sound like some heartless monster, and a few extended family members bought into his narrative. They called and texted, scolding me for being so cruel and ungrateful. I didn't have the energy to explain the full story to everyone. Thankfully, not everyone believed him. Neighbors and a few close family friends who had seen the chaos firsthand stepped in to support me. One even lent me cleaning supplies to deal with the mess Ryan had left behind. Their kindness was a reminder that not everyone was willing to enable Ryan's behavior. Mom finally admitted that she should have been firmer with Ryan. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten, she said quietly. I didn't want to give up on him. You're not giving up on him, Mom, I said. You're just setting boundaries. He needs to learn to stand on his own. We sat down and worked out a new financial plan, agreeing that no one, family or not, would live in the house without contributing. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it felt like progress. As for Ryan, he found a place to stay with a friend. He posted online about how he was starting fresh, but I wasn't holding my breath. Knowing Ryan, it was only a matter of time before he burned that bridge too. Despite the chaos, I felt a sense of relief. The house was quiet again. The bills were manageable, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I wish it hadn't come to this, but at least now, Mom and I could finally move forward. 2 months had passed since Ryan left, and life was finally starting to feel normal again. The house was peaceful. The bills were under control. I no longer had to worry about missing groceries or unpaid utilities. Mom seemed more relaxed, too, as if a weight had been lifted. For the first time in years, it felt like we were getting back on track. But peace has a way of being short-lived when it comes to Ryan. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was in the backyard fixing a loose board on the fence when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. I turned around to see Ryan stepping out, duffel bag in hand, wearing the same self-assured smirk that always made my stomach churn. "Hey, Ev," he called out, like nothing had happened. "Mom home? What are you doing here?" I asked, walking over to meet him at the side of the house. "You're not supposed to just show up like this." Ryan shrugged, slinging the duffel bag over his shoulder. "I need a place to stay. My roommate kicked me out. Total toxic environment, man. I couldn't take it anymore." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my temper in check. "Toxic environment? Or did you not pay rent again?" Ryan's smirk faltered for a second before he recovered. "That's not important. The point is, I had no choice but to leave. So, here I am." By the time I could respond, Mom had come out to see what was going on. Her face lit up when she saw Ryan, and before I could stop her, she was ushering him inside. Within minutes, he was sitting in the living room, acting like he owned the place again. This time, I didn't waste any time. Ryan, no, I said firmly. You can't move back in. Not after everything that happened. Ryan looked at me like I'd slapped him. Seriously? You're still holding a grudge? I said I'd pay you back, didn't I? You said that for months, I replied. And you never did. You trashed the house, stole my stuff, and left us with unpaid bills. You're not coming back here. Mom, who had been sitting quietly, finally spoke up. Evan's right, Ryan. You need to figure this out on your own. Ryan's jaw dropped. Mom, you're siding with him? I'm your son. Exactly, she said softly. And it's time for you to take responsibility for your life. Ryan's expression darkened. Fine. I'll find somewhere else to stay. But I just need a little help first. Can you loan me some money? Just enough for a deposit on a new place. I promise I'll pay it back. I sighed, already seeing where this was going. How much are you asking for? Ryan rattled off a number that made my jaw tighten. It wasn't a small amount. It was clear he didn't have a plan, just another excuse to avoid accountability. No, I said. You're not getting any more money from us. You've burned that bridge, Ryan. Ryan's face turned red. You're unbelievable, Evan. You act like you're so much better than me, but you don't know what it's like to struggle. Don't twist this, I shot back. You're not struggling, you're freeloading. There's a difference. Mom looked heartbroken but didn't argue. I could tell she wanted to help him, but even she couldn't deny the truth anymore. Ryan, as usual, refused to accept any blame. He accused me of holding a grudge, of abandoning family, and even claimed Dad would be ashamed of me. When that didn't work, he started yelling loud enough for the neighbors to hear. He accused us of turning our backs on him and ruining his life. By the time he finally stormed off, tossing his duffel bag into the car and peeling out of the driveway, I felt exhausted but resolute. Later that evening, Mom and I talked. She admitted she wished she had handled things differently from the start. I just wanted to help him, she said, her voice heavy with regret. I didn't realize how much damage it was causing. It's not your fault, Mom, I said. You did what you thought was best. But now, we have to stick to our boundaries. For both our sakes. For a while, things were quiet. Ryan didn't contact us, and I hoped it would stay that way. But about a week later, I came home from work and noticed something was off. The back door, which we always kept locked, was slightly ajar. My stomach sank as I stepped inside and realized several things were missing. My gaming console was gone, along with an old laptop, a watch Dad had given me, and a small box of Mom's jewelry. The house wasn't ransacked, but it was clear whoever had taken the items knew exactly what they were after. My mind immediately went to Ryan, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions without proof. The next day, I spoke to a neighbor who had a security camera facing our street. They were kind enough to check the footage, and there it was. Ryan sneaking into the house late at night, climbing through the back window with a backpack. He left 20 minutes later, the bag noticeably fuller. Armed with the footage, I showed Mom. She was devastated. I didn't want to believe he'd go this far, she said, tears in her eyes. What do we do? I called Ryan and confronted him. At first, he denied everything, claiming he had no idea what I was talking about. But when I mentioned the security footage, his story changed. Fine, he said. I took the stuff. I needed money for rent. I was going to pay you back. That's not how this works, Ryan, I said. You stole from us. That's unforgivable. Mom begged me not to call the police, but I knew we couldn't let this slide. Ryan had crossed too many lines. Reluctantly, I filed a report using the security footage as evidence. The fallout was immediate. Ryan cut off all contact with us, calling us traitors and accusing us of ruining his life. Some extended family members sided with him, buying into his sob story. It hurt, but I stood firm. I wasn't going to let him manipulate us anymore. About a month later, we heard Ryan had been arrested for shoplifting electronics from a local store. It wasn't surprising, but it was still painful to know how far he'd fallen. Despite everything, I hoped this would be the wake-up call he needed. But I wasn't holding my breath. For now, Mom and I were focused on rebuilding, cleaning up the mess he'd left behind, both literal and emotional. The house finally felt like a safe space again, and while the trust between us and Ryan might never be repaired, I knew we were better off without the chaos. Sometimes, Loving someone means letting them face the consequences of their actions. It wasn't easy, but it was the only way forward. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful. Ryan's story was his to write now, but I was determined to write my own. A story of peace, stability, and moving on.